I was one of those guys that when people saw me preach or heard me lead, they would say to me, "Man, I can't wait to see you in 10 years. You're really going to be somebody." Well, 10 years has come and gone, and I've not become what I was projected to be. I don't think I realized the damage that ambition can do. When I finished seminary, I was well on my way. I went to my first church as a senior pastor, 26 years old. We had modest growth from 70 or so people to about 220. I pursued a PhD. I ended up going and teaching at a seminary. I wrote 2 books in 3 years, and one of those books, Preaching to a Post-Everything World, won a national award. I was speaking nearly every weekend, all over the country, and everything was set for me. A life of influence, of doing things for God, was right in front of me. That's when everything changed. A dear friend of mine, who is a successful pastor, he took his own life. My family and I moved to that church, and I served as an interim pastor for 6 months to try to walk with that congregation as they grieved the loss of their pastor. And I too walked with them to grieve the loss of my dear friend. And through that process, I began to ask myself this question: Did my friend know that he didn't have to be a pastor to be loved or to make a difference in our lives? Did he know that he could have stepped down within the struggle he was facing and still have been a friend to so many of us that he mentored, still have dispensed gospel wisdom and grace? Did he know that he didn't have to be a pastor to make a difference? And soon enough, I had to ask that question for myself, because not too long later, my wife of 15 or 16 years, she walked away from Jesus and walked away from me. And I suddenly went from doing large things notably and fast to do great things for God to being a single dad with the ordinary and primary care of my 3 children on a daily basis. And in the midst of that community, there was a scandal. I had been that known person, and now my marriage was broken. What did that say about me as a person, as a minister? And so there I was, taking a long look in the mirror. And I began to think to myself, do I still matter? If I don't have all these credentials, if my book doesn't sell anymore, if I'm not a pastor anymore, and if I won't be again, do I still belong to Jesus? Does He still love me? If I'm talked about in the community, does Jesus still talk about me in gospel terms? As I'm asking those questions, in those kinds of ordinary beauties of daily love and care and grief, Jesus began to show me something. Began to tell me something about greatness. Yeah, it's a cool thing, even a marvelous thing to preach to 40 or 400 or 4,000. What about changing a diaper? What about being a dad? What about feeling my inadequacy and needing grace? Do we still matter when all we're doing is ordinary things? Yeah, we do.